to us and given us confidence from the Committee of Education of Parliament. And then we are progressing with an esteemed panel, but I'll give the aims and then we shall continue for this dialogue. One of the aims for this dialogue, our viewers and the people that are in the hall here, is to mobilize partners to maintain education at the top of the political agenda and deliver on the TES and SDG commitments. As we are aware, we know that education and quality access to education is SDG number 4, and we are working towards this. Our second aim for this dialogue is to generate visibility at the local levels on the importance of education in strengthening and sustaining peace as outlined in SDG 4.7 to be specific, and other global education efforts. Thirdly, we are here to advocate for higher levels of domestic and international financing for education in general and education for peace in particular, especially through innovative and multi-sector holder engagements. Fourthly, to rally key stakeholders to push forward the movement to bring education into the center of local, national, and regional peace building efforts. This aligns very well with the theme that I'm going to highlight as I finish. Last but not least, this event is to raise awareness for effective approaches in education for peace and mobilize commitment for their implementation. The global theme for the International Day of Education was Education for Lasting Peace, and we are building on that particular theme to have this dialogue. Since morning, we have had esteemed speakers, and we are using participatory methods, which have included key speeches that have come through from our distinguished guests, but we have also now organized panels, just like the one that you are about to witness and be part of experts, people that are part of arranging and putting together systems that support our education. But also, we are also to have round-table discussions, all to have input and make suggestions to make our education system better. We have just had a speech from Mrs. Atim Francis, who is the Director Standards at the Ministry of Education and Sports, and she has excited us with a system that is going to help to arrest some of the challenges that are within our education system. And to discuss that paper, but as well as the paper that was presented earlier, and to interrogate from the panelists, I am happy to welcome Dr. Julius Byaruhanga, who is the Director of Policy and Business Development under the Private Sector Foundation. He will discuss and then after help to interrogate the panel that we have today. Let's receive him with a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Master of Ceremonies. In the private sector, we don't observe protocol. So I will stand on the protocol that has already been observed. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since morning we've had constructive discussions as regards our education system. But for purposes of this very distinguished panel, we'll be interrogating further the papers that have been presented. One that was presented on behalf of Mr. Muvawara from the National Planning Authority by Mr. Kasure Samuel, who is a senior planner. And the paper was basically looking at the nexus between education and peace. Just for us to have an understanding and remind ourselves about what was presented, it's very important to appreciate that sustainable peace, of course, is determined largely by what one does after school based on the definition that we had. But also to build on the fact that according to one of the most prominent economic scholars called Thinker Mukadewire, who in one of his inaugural speeches pointed out that the development of post-colonial Africa largely depends on how African nations invest in their education systems. In his paper, he highlighted that peace is the absence of war, fear, conflict, anxiety, suffering, and violence. And of course, went further to point out that violence is a result of poverty and inequality. So we shall try to dwell so much on the question of, since we don't have war here, we'll look at anxiety, suffering, but also the question of poverty and inequality to try to make our discussion more practical as opposed to being theoretical. And in that regard, we shall dwell more on one of the key theories that was pointed out in the paper, which is the human capital theory. This theory largely rhymes also with our financial year budget, which is going to be read tomorrow, which focuses a lot on human capital development and which has been one of the major programs of the government of Uganda. The human capital theory, as we might know, of course, was espoused by some prominent scholars, Gary Becker and Theodore Schutz. And these scholars looked at it considering the fact that employees are the fact of production. So in this sense, then, how do we make our young people who are coming out of education system more productive, and that then translates into economic development. So, but for them to be productive, as Mr. Kasure rightly pointed out, there are key variables that must be considered. And one of them is the knowledge, which knowledge you acquire, of course, from school, the skills, and thanks to the Ministry of Education for the new curriculum, which tries to instill skills in our young people, but also the abilities, and all these translate into productivity. So that informs the human capital, or looking at a person as a whole in terms of how productive they are. So the thinking behind this is, of course, to enable us to appreciate that all the theories discussed in the paper can fundamentally be covered in most, to a bigger extent, when we expose more on this human capital theory and trying to translate this into how it can contribute to a peaceful coexistence. So he concluded by pointing out that education that promotes peace should largely respond to Uganda's problems and social, economic, and political structure. What that essentially means is that the solutions to our problems are with us and are primarily with our education system. Following that, of course, we had a very informative presentation from Ms. Atima Frances, the Director, Education Standards at the Ministry of Education and Sports, which was largely informing us about the initiatives to deliver quality education. And on that, you can underline the word quality, which essentially makes our young people whole. On that, she pointed out the key initiatives the ministry has put in place, primarily under her directorate. And these are essentially to ensure that quality education is relevant. Remember what we already talked about in terms of ensuring that our young people are a solution to our problems. So ensuring that our education translates into knowledge and essential productivity, accessible, given, of course, the earlier discussions about the fact that education is a human right, but also effective and efficient. We use the rest of the resources we have to achieve more that will translate into economic, socio-economic development. So as part of the initiatives, and this is really a fresh discussion in our minds because it just ended, she clearly pointed out the benchmarks in form of standards that the ministry has put in place. So unless you have set standards, then you're moving like a headless chicken. You don't know where to go, how to go, when to go. So the ministry has put in place standards as a benchmark to guide on how to check where we are moving. The inspection, or what one may call enforcement mechanisms in form of supervision, how to ensure that these set standards are being followed to the letter, but also adapting to the trend, given that Madame Frances is presiding over a Gen Z generation. She has to make sure that she has everything that is being done technologically being monitored in the comfort of her office, such that the systems and the set standards are being efficiently and effectively implemented. So just to sum it, of course, a lot was presented, but there is one key word or phrase that she pointed out, which was that head teachers, or the ministry, is looking at a head teacher as the first line of an inspector. And that reminded me of my primary head teacher, Madame Frances. I'm one of the very first beneficiaries of UPE. And I remember my primary head teacher, Mr. Didas, every time I meet him, I buy him lunch, because he made sure that he was at school by 6:30 a.m. He would make sure that he inspects every classroom by 8 a.m. and candidate classes, he trained them himself, and is the one who taught me English. So every mistake I make in English, just to know, he's the one responsible. But since I'm a grown-up, I will partly take the blame. So basically, those were the presentations, and we have a very able panel here. So we will, of course, focus our discussion on these presentations that were made. I have one question for each of our panelists, and having been a timekeeper in my secondary education, I'll make sure that you keep time. I have one general question for each one of us, and that will take 1.5 minutes. And then we'll go into specific questions for each of our able panelists. And of course, we'll go from my left hand up to the lady, then the next will be in the same order. So our first question is, of course, trying to find out, based on the papers that have been presented, are the products of education system in Uganda at peace, and are they of standard? Why or why not? So we will start from here, and maybe if you may, you will allow me sit, such that I can effectively interact with the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Richard Nasete, and representing Country Director of IRC, International Ski Committee. Now, particular to your submission, I think I want to reflect on the earlier submission of access. Now we have this UPE, unfortunately we are a product of UPE. We have over threefold improved access. But then the question that arises is quality, and I think a lot still is desired. And this is something that we have seen the ministry really emphasize. You see an improvement, you see new reforms, teacher policy reforms. You're seeing the new teacher, the teacher bill before Parliament. You're seeing the recent approval of Uganda National Institute of Teacher Education. This shows that actually the country observes that in as much as we have increased access, one key challenge is quality. And that is something we can't take away. It's something that we all have to sit together and really put our efforts to seeing that we have the kind of quality of education we want. Now, that goes back to one question. What is the kind of education we want? So that's the question we all have to answer, and we all have to go to know it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next panelist.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Augustine Lubanga, National Medical Director, Uganda Cares. I'm in here for the country program director. The products of education are safe. Indeed, as colleagues, my colleague has put it, yeah, to a certain extent. But even with the access goes through the continuum of education from lower, secondary, and then the higher. We've seen that that access is lost also along the way, so there are still those. And having come from the health sector, normally when we have those dropouts and people are not well prepared to absorb, for instance, the public health information that we've passed on. More importantly, the preventive messages to protect them from diseases like HIV. Then from that angle, they may not be safe. And we see that we have not a new demographic, but we are largely a younger population, and the young people actually most affected. And it's the particular group that we are talking about when it comes to education. They are the majority. We see that they don't have adequate knowledge for HIV prevention. There are still gaps. And currently, in the previous 3-4 years, we are seeing that the burden of some of the diseases like HIV is turning onto them. So something needs to be done in our education to protect that group, and that's how we can realize total peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Jasper Chomkamo. I'm the director of Baroque Publishers. And I'm glad to be part of this panel to discuss these important issues, and in particular, this important question about the status and the quality of education we have and what could be done. Yeah, I want to start by appreciating that delivering quality education is not an easy task. It's complex, it's arduous, and it's not only in this country that we have challenges of moving at the pace we like. So we appreciate that some strides have been made, especially if you refer to the presentation of the director standards. You can see that they understand the problem, the challenge. They have set the standards. They have identified the key performance indicators. And to me, what I love most is they are putting in place an integrated system to monitor and assess progress based on the performance indicators they have set. This is what we really need. We need to leapfrog from where we are to a more feasible situation. And leapfrogging requires a disruptive approach. And a disruptive approach requires a disruptive tool. And I love what the Director Standards has presented, that they are adopting a disruptive approach that does things in a different way. And they have adopted a disruptive tool in the form of an ICT tool that monitors in an integrated way, in real time, what is happening in schools. To me, that's beautiful. That's what we have to do everywhere in all these aspects of education. Then the other aspect I would want to talk about is actually the challenge. One can discuss it under the mechanisms we have in place. That's infrastructure. That is the soft infrastructure and the hard infrastructure. The hard infrastructure is not very difficult, but the tricky is the soft infrastructure that alludes to policy, legal, institutional arrangements, human capacity, development, technical skills, and then financing. That is where the challenges are. But to me, the beauty is that they are known, and the question is how to address them. Me as a publisher, I want, under the soft infrastructure, I want to single out the aspect of learning materials. We are talking about education, but we are talking about learning. So learning, education has got a wider definition. It's more focused, it's more structured, but within education, you are learning. So there's an aspect of learning materials, and we are publishers. We really need to look at that. We need learning that addresses the 21st century skills. Okay. If we are not doing that, then we are not doing a good education. But one thing is happening. It's happening because Ministry of Education started by introducing the thematic curriculum. The thematic curriculum addresses actually these themes. Like the theme we've been discussing about education for lasting peace. You find even in primary, in whatever, it's captured in a way or another. So the question is consolidating those aspects. So the aspect of capturing, then in secondary school, you have got the learner-centered competence-based curriculum that is being adopted. It's a very beautiful curriculum. Most of you are parents or whatever, the students, whatever, teachers, and you really know what is happening. But it's a beautiful curriculum, but it's difficult. It requires resources to get implemented. But we are on the way. We have identified the pathway to success.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The next.
Yes, thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon, members present here, and also those who are following us on the line. My name is Charles Draichabo. I'm the National Projects Coordinator for UNESCO program in Uganda, and part of this panel, and I will try to respond to the question that has been asked in the interest of time. The question, I think, yes, I paraphrase, is whether the type of education we have today is at peace and is causing development as we would like. In other words, we are trying to interrogate ourselves to ask the question whether we have the type of education we need, or whether there's quality education, access to quality education for all, according to the SDG 4. And I think for me, to look at that, the answer could be yes and no. Yes, in the sense of how far the country has taken steps to move towards achieving quality education for all. But no, in the sense that we are living in a transforming world, and therefore we must transform ourselves to meet the requirements of the changing society. And to better understand this, probably I will use the 4 domains of learning, as you know, published by UNESCO. The first domain is why do we learn? We learn to know. That's the first one. And the second one is we learn to do. And the third one is we learn to live. And the fourth one is we learn to live with others. So if we were to be fair to ourselves to see whether our education system is delivering quality, we need to look at all the four domains. I think the tendency and the risk in most cases is that we remain at the first two domains, where we say education is quality because people are accessing learning to know. You have the information, you know the facts, you know. So what do you do with the knowledge that you have? The second domain is learning to do. You have the skills and then you apply it. So to what extent is our education system actually preparing our learners to do with the skills something that is useful to them? We do appreciate the new curriculum for the lower secondary education. And I think that is trying to address and respond to that. Now, when it comes to the last two domains, we have a serious challenge because many of us tend to think that that is outside the domain of learning. We learn to live, meaning that the education system that we have to interrogate it. Does it prepare the young generation to live a life that is meaningful? Or are we producing skillful young people who will be mentally disturbed because they cannot cope up with the challenges of today? How about living with others? We are listening and observing to the cases of suicides committed by students among themselves. That means that our education system is not appropriately responding to the last two domains, learning to live and learning to live with others.
Okay.
So in the interest of time, I think we can assess ourselves based on that and therefore prepare ourselves to address the four domains in order to deliver quality education for all.
Thank you. Thank you. The next panelist, 1.5 minutes, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Anthony Mwagamugaga, a professor of educational philosophy and principal, College of Education and Sciences in Makerere University. The quality of education in Uganda. And the answer to me is yes and no. Urban education in Uganda has improved significantly, as shown in the performance of these urban schools and peri-urban schools in national exams. But rural education, every now and then, continues to go down, as evidenced by the performance of students in national exams. When you look at upcountry schools and university entry in our various universities in Uganda, they seem not to feature anywhere. They seem not to feature anywhere. The concentration of performance is in urban areas. And I think what we need to do is to decolonize funding. I don't mean decolonizing education, but funding. When you look at the donors and sponsors of this conference, are mainly not homemade. There are about 3 or 4 who are homemade. Others are international. Now, you cannot say decolonize education when the person who is sponsoring your education is from abroad. Now, you want to decolonize him so that he doesn't fund you. The other issue, on the issue of peace within our education, the fact that the rural education has collapsed, it creates challenges. And that those challenges may, in the long run, create violence as a result of semi-baked persons who have graduated up to A level but cannot access university. No wonder we have very many people migrating, many young people migrating to those Middle East and so forth. So what I think we need to do is to create national ideological programs which will change the mindset of many of us and a lot of our persons. Why? Because the products of our education system are tending towards a bit of violence. Look at the political elite class, how they fight in the various political parties. Today it is NUP fighting against NUP, FDC fighting against NUP, and a lot of all these are a product of our education system. So what we need is a national ideology and a kind of mindset change. And at the same time, spread out the education money so that all areas of Uganda are covered instead of concentrating in urban areas and peri-urban areas. Because at the end of the day, when the child in Koboko, the child in Rwamuchuchu also wish to come and study medicine, but we know that courses like medicine, engineering, law on government are a preserve of urban and peri-urban students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. The only ready on the panel.
Thank you so much, our moderator, the members in here, and our viewers. I'm Brenda Akite Otika. I work with Star Education, and I oversee government relations and partnership. In terms of my reflection on the question at hand,
maybe Brenda, sorry to cut you short. As you answer that question, you could take exceptionally being ready 3 minutes to also let us know how Star Education Uganda supports the employability of young graduates, so that you can wrap it up with that very first question asked. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mine is also a yes and a no. A yes, we recognize the contribution and the efforts done by the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Education and Sports to try to put in place policies that are meant at contributing towards increasing access to education, the quality and aspects of equity and inclusiveness. One thing is around the implementation of these policies. There is a deviation in the implementation, and as we get into the reality on the ground, we'll find that those who implement them, we are able to see the results, and those who are still struggling will also see the difference in terms of the uptake of those policies. I also want to recognize the critical role of the teacher when it comes to giving the learner that great experience as they are in school, in the learning environment, even as they leave the school and get into the world. I think, moderator, you shared your experience of your head teacher, whom you remember. Why? Because of the connection that he had with his learners or with the students. We'll realize that teachers spend most of the time with the learners in the education space, and the environment that the teacher creates is what will determine whether the learner enjoys going to school, enjoys learning or not. But also the teacher has needs. If a teacher is motivated, if a teacher likes what he or she does, then the teacher will move the extra mile to ensure that he creates that enabling environment for the learners. The actions of the teacher will promote critical thinking among the learners. The action of the teacher will create opportunity for collaborative learning, for networking, for learners to also demonstrate empathy among themselves. So the classroom or the school that the learner goes through will determine how they will behave when they get out there. So that would contribute towards bringing about peace. The other thing is the relationship between the different players within the education sector. We'll find some schools where if a teacher meets the head teacher, they may turn away because of the face that the head teacher puts in place. There are some head teachers that don't have the time to bond with their teachers. Likewise, there are also teachers that when learners meet them in the compound, they will look for where to hide or disappear. But if this relationship across different stakeholders is something that is strengthened, it will make the learning environment a peaceful one, which would then help the learners to survive as they get out there. The other one is also around the strategies.
Maybe if you could go towards Star Uganda's
Yes.
to support employability of young people.
Okay. So in terms of what Star Education is doing, one of the key things we do is around supporting teachers to develop skills that will improve their teaching practices. So we focus on evidence-based teaching strategies that teachers embed in their lesson plans, and they are able to use them to make the learner at the center of the learning process in their respective classrooms. We've had teachers implement gender-responsive pedagogy. How can a teacher attend to each and every learner that is in their classroom? It could be the fast learners, it could be, they're called the time takers, it could be learners with special needs. If teachers bring in interactive or collaborative activities, are all these categories being taken into consideration? And at the end of it all, when group work is given and learners are given the opportunity to make presentations, they will leave the school, they will leave the education systems when they are critical thinkers, when they are able to make presentations, when they are able to collaborate and work with other people. So the skills that they acquire at the school level will help them to use them as they get out of the education system.
Thank you, Brenda. In 1 minute, half a minute, Professor, just so we wrap up, we are racing against time. The growing unemployability challenge, what is the university quickly in half a minute doing to ensure that your graduates are employable?
We are beginning to change our curriculum into competence-based, which is a hybrid of what you have in secondary school, so that children or students who come from the university are able necessarily not to look for jobs alone, but employ themselves, because whether we want it or not, jobs will never be there.
Thank you. Ms. Charis from UNESCO, one of the SDGs, specifically SDG 4 looks at quality of education. How can our education system promote, quote unquote, lifelong learning opportunities for all? In half a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, as I mentioned earlier on, we are discussing transforming education. And transforming education has parameters, and one of them is inclusive education for all. So what I will think needs to be done is Uganda, being a signatory to that Transforming Education Summit, reviews the progress and addresses some of the gaps that has made it so difficult for us to, attain sustainable education, to be part of the global, convention, but also localize that convention in order to deliver what will require as a sustainable education for all.
Okay, thank you. From Brook Publishers, we are in a Gen Z generation. How are you tailoring your work in publishing to meet the trending way of how young people consume knowledge? In half a minute.
To us, that is very central. And our meme or our catchword is publishing through innovative partnerships to spur a knowledge society and knowledge economy. And those aspects of knowledge, society, knowledge economy, it alludes actually to the youth. And that's what our take also put central, we as Baroque publishers, emphasizing the 21st century skills. In this case, we are even producing 21st century learning kits, and at one time, and those kits actually one thing is they target actually the youth. So in this case, the aspect of technology, the aspect of e-publishing, to make sure that literature is available in a much more conducive, in a much more impressive arrangement for the Gen Z, is one of the considerations. So actually, as far as that's at the level of innovation of each publishing company, but also at a broader level, the Ministry of Education should also go into that to make sure that the interests of the Zenji, the way they interact, the way with education, the way they interact with learning is changing, and especially the role of the social media.
Thank you.
Is very, very critical. And we're not forgetting artificial intelligence, which is really coming up. And one thing is, it looks to be very far, but is here. So those are aspects actually that can bring in the fold
Thank
the
you.
young generation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. AIDS Healthcare Foundation. what initiatives are you putting in place to ensure that they are safe spaces, especially for young kids who are HIV positive? Because as we saw, stigmatization is one of the indicators of peaceless or having no peace. Thank you. In half a minute.
Thank you very much. What we are doing as the AIDS Healthcare Foundation Uganda Cares here is to empower our young people with the, first of all, knowledge and skills for them to understand their sexuality, life, so that because we are seeing a gap there for them when it comes to preventing HIV and also addressing the day-to-day challenges that they have. For instance, in the area of menstrual hygiene, we are trying to train them on how to make pads, but also providing them and so on. The issue of the knowledge, we do have the peers, whom we call the ambassadors. So these are change people. They are skilled to go and reach out. You know that a big size of the young people out of school, and those don't benefit from what our government has put in place. They may miss out. So we are trying to have those grassroots ambassadors to go and reach out to these out-of-school young people and provide them with that knowledge and so on. But as in our work, we also work with them, so providing employment to them and ensuring they are prepared to take on bigger roles and so on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. From the International Rescue Committee, if you could add to a submission, because you seem to be in the same space, ensuring the safety of our kids in school.
International Rescue Committee ideally believes that the solution to quality education is with all of us. We all have innovative approaches. But what we need is to share the evidence of how these innovative approaches can really impact on quality education. Two, we also believe that we need to address the entire socio-ecological environment of a child. This child, where is this child often spaced? In the home. Therefore, the parents and caretakers have a very critical role to play quality education. You have the entire community. What's the ideology, like our professors mentioning? What's the ideology? What's the social normal? Can we promote these cultures, the positive cultures, and promote how they are supporting the schools? We have all these partners, the civil society, implementing programs. How are these programs positively impacting on quality education? And then lastly, we are very keen. We know that at the center of quality education, whether we run left, right, is the teacher. And unless we place emphasis on supporting this teacher to perform, to be effective, to be ethically right, we will have a poor education. We all relate to that teacher who really drove us, who really inspired us in school. But we also have those teachers whom we look back and say, oh my goodness, I wish that teacher wasn't a teacher. Okay, so can we look into that? And that's what we are calling for.
Thank you so much. I think teachers take the day. Ladies and gentlemen, hands of applause to our able panel. And we apologize for rushing you through. We are racing against time. We thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause to the panel. And Dr. Julius Vyaruhanga, who was a discussant for the two papers, one by the National Planning Authority and the one that was also presented by Madame Frances, who is the Director of Standards at the Ministry of Education and Sports. As ladies and gentlemen, we will have to quickly use the opportunity that we have. We do not want millions out there to miss out on these presentations. I know we are going to be ambassadors of the information that we are getting, but it is also good for the millions out there to get this information firsthand. So I want to thank Dr. Biaruhanga and the panelists that have really given us. But then we also want to quickly dive into the next panel on financing so that we can be able to have this panel on live as well on air. But before I call, as I call them to come and take their seats, I'm going to invite our Director of Standards, having listened to the panel, to basically wrap up and give us confidence that what we are talking about can be done, and if not, what else can we do as we prepare to have the next panel on financing. Round of applause.
Thank you so much. I would like to add my voice to thank the panelists for their very useful thoughts. And we take note of issues. We take note of their interventions. And I think we'll have an opportunity to digest them further. But allow me to say that in sub-Saharan Africa, the issue of quality education is still a very key challenge. So it's not only an issue of Uganda. We know that learning poverty, if you look at statistics in Africa, is still one of the biggest challenges. I would like to borrow what one of the presenters and the panelists said, that the issue of quality education is a complex issue. It is not something that we can be able to address in one day. It is a process, but we celebrate all the milestones, and what is important, that we are working towards achieving and consolidating the gains and coming up with innovative approaches to achieve quality education. As you're all aware, we're looking at our theme, Education for Lasting Peace. And one of our presentations was talking about peace as a precursor to education. But I think we can also say, if you have to consolidate peace, then you must have education. So the two are intertwined and both very important. I also just want to say that, as mentioned by UNESCO, talking about the 4 domains, we really need to acknowledge that the two, learning to live and learning to live together, is one of the most important aspects if we have to talk about peace. So therefore, we, the actors in education and stakeholders, we need to be looking at beyond having grades. And this takes me to the comparison that's been given between urban and rural. And we're looking at results at P7 as a litmus of good performance, which for me, from the quality assurance point of view, it's yes and no. Because a school must be looked at holistically. And if we're to talk about achievements in education, we also need to look at all the 3 domains. Yes, cognitive is important, but affective and psychomotor domains are also very critical. And I know from the work that I do, the schools in the rural are doing much better in those domains compared to the schools in urban who are running for grades and focusing on cognitive. So we need to decolonize our thinking as well, that grades is the measure of quality education. I think we need to look at all aspects holistically. And we also know that we measure passing by pass rates. And progressively, each time results have been released, we're seeing an upward trend on performance of pass rates across the board. So I think let's not look at first grade alone. Let's look at what is the value the teachers are adding. And I would really like to congratulate and thank our teachers amidst the difficulties for ensuring that they are adding value in rural education, because children are progressively learning. And thank you all, because I know most of you, that is where your focus is. You're supporting education in rural areas. And there is evidence that there is performance and there is improvement. We'd like to assure you that we're taking this as very important engagements with you. And hopefully that will continue engaging in this space of education. And I would just like to thank you once again and thank the panelists for their insights on the presentations and in education in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for our Director of Standards. You know, when certain people speak, then you surely do not wonder why they hold certain positions. Madam Francis, we are happy that you are the one in that docket, and we only wish you the very best, that you'll continue to do the work that you're doing. Since morning, she's been inspiring us and telling us practical things that the ministry is doing to ensure that we are on the right path and we move faster. Because as Africa, as Uganda, we need to move faster as we do the catch-up, but maybe at some point we can be together with the developed world. Ladies and gentlemen, and the viewers that are still with us, we have just concluded a high-level panel of experts, and we have seen and heard what is possible, but now we want to talk matters finance, because we earlier on highlighted that finance for education is key to steam up and to be able to support all these other methods and approaches and systems that we are setting up. To have this, we are going to have the next panel, and it is also high level, just like you're about to hear the people that I'm about to invite. And I will invite you to applaud them as they come. And then we have an amazing moderator that I will just unveil very shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome the head of mission for the Embassy of Iceland in Kampala. I am sure the moderator will be able to give some time so that they are able to introduce themselves better and tell us a little more about the work that they do directly. We also have representation from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, a representative for the ministry. Ladies and gentlemen, also join me to welcome the country director of UNICEF. Another round of applause for him. He's very passionate about education and also for the wonderful work that UNICEF does in this country. We also have representation from URA, Uganda Revenue Authority, representing the Commissioner General. Yes, clap for the wonderful tax collectors. These are the people that make sure that we can domestically finance our initiatives. We are happy to have you, Uganda Revenue Authority. We also have representation for the country director of the World Bank. Yes, our brother right there, he's coming through. Let's give him another round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not least on this particular lineup is none other than the Executive Director of the Economic Policy Research Center, Dr. Sarah Sewanyana, who will kickstart this panel with a presentation on education financing. But just like the previous panel, I'm not worthy to moderate it. We have our sister, who is highly esteemed, Margot Hasfa, from Read to Learn Foundation, that is going to moderate this panel. Yeah. Give her another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Protocol observed, distinguished guests, our panels, partners, and our young learners. Good afternoon and welcome to this high-level policy dialogue as a post-event for the International Day of Education 2024. I'll allow the presentation, and then we'll begin our panel discussions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. My name is again Sarah Sewanyana. I'm the Executive Director of the Economic Policy Research Center. We are based at Makerere University. The task before me is to give some hints on the education financing in Uganda. Uganda is a signatory to the Global Sustainable Development Goal, as you have already heard. And we have only less than 7 years to the year of for the year of hope, which is 2030. Of interest to this presentation is the SDG 4, which is supposed to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. These are big words, okay? They are big words, and when it comes to financing, we need to ask ourselves whether we are really touching these big words. When you look at the SDG 4, when you look at the targets, the first target is on quality primary and secondary education for all. The second one is on the early childhood and pre-primary education, which we normally refer to as early child development or something like that. And number 3 is equal access to TVET and higher education. You mark the words, right? And then the 4, skills for decent work. 5, gender equality and equal access for all. 6 is youth and adult literacy. And the last one, I will not focus on the other 4, is sustainable development and global citizenship. That is the SDG 4. We know where I want to go, but we can't go there without funding, okay? But that said, at least the government of Uganda has done a lot. You cannot deny that. We are among the first countries to implement the universal access to primary education. And this has always been a song that we've been able to move from the 2.5 enrollment in 1997 to 5.3 in 1997, and now we are standing around 8.6 million in 2023, depending on the data source that you are using. We also know that is already addressing one of the SDG, one of the targets. We also know that Uganda was the first country, among the first countries, to implement universal secondary education. And this was done in 2007. And we have also seen increases in that area in terms of enrollment. We also know that Uganda has, to some extent, eliminated gender disparity, especially at the primary level. When you look at the data, you see we are about 50-50 girls, 50 boys. And for some, if we try to do some disaggregation, at times we even find that girls are more in some places than the boys. We also know that despite all these achievements, despite also the achievements in terms of policies, in terms of reforms, we know that we still have a high school dropout. Remember, it is education for all. If it is education for all, you would have loved to have everybody in school. If somebody says P1 should be able at least to complete the primary education system. However, what do we see in terms of access? We did a cohort analysis based on the children that entered primary 1 in 2013. When you look at the 2013, by 2019, 29% of those children had dropped out of school. We also tried to look at what stage do they drop out. We saw that girls were more likely to drop out when they are transiting from lower to middle class, to middle primary, okay? But when it comes to P6, P7, you are seeing the reverse. We see more boys dropping out than girls. We also know that when we talk about education financing, it can either be in terms of finances or it can be in terms of in-kind. And we've seen some of these things happening in Uganda in our communities, where the communities can be able to, that, okay, me, I'm going to bring bricks and so on. That is in-kind, okay? But we are going to focus more on the physical financial component. And when we talk about education financing, we really need to pay a lot of attention on the allocation, utilization, and accountability. And we need to think about this in terms of the SDG lens that I spoke about earlier on. We also know that education financing, the modalities of financing vary across the education system. When you look at the ecosystem, there are lots of variations. We see a lot of contribution at the primary level from public funds. Then when it goes to secondary, it tries to come down. And when it comes to TVET or higher education, we see private financing coming more handy there. So we tried to look at the National Development Plan to try to tease out on the program where education fits. And I think we all know that we are following a program approach. And education falls under the human capital development, and I'm sure this has been discussed in the morning. And education is a subsector under this bigger program. However, what really failed me a bit, and probably it is good that they invited me to come here, I've never taken a keen eye to look at the National Budget Framework, that book. I've never taken a lot of time to look at it and see what it means. However, when you look at it, the figures are not easy to understand. And when you move away from the framework paper to the budget, ministerial policy statements, again, you see different figures. So it was really a challenge. If we really want to monitor what is happening to education financing and any other area that is related to SDG, we need to ensure that we are using quality data to help us in monitoring what is happening. But that said, the presentation is really based on the National Budget Framework paper that was released last year by Ministry of Finance. And now when you look at this framework paper, under the human capital development, we find that nearly 50% of the budget of the human capital development program goes to the education subsector, which is really understandable because that's where we have the biggest population, and that's where we have the biggest public servants and so on. Now, when you look at try to look at the financial year 2021-22, the education sector accounted for 11% of the national budget. But when you look at financial year 2023-24, there is a reduction of that from 11.1% to 8.3%. And one wonders why is that so, given the fact that Uganda's population pyramid is really heavier at the bottom. I also tried to look at the share of education to GDP, and it's only 2%. It's only 2%. And we are talking about a knowledge economy and so many those buzzwords. And this 2% is projected to continue until 2028-2029 financial year. I tried to again look at the share of the recurrent expenditure, recurrent where we pay wages and so on. The recurrent expenditure, we are taking 65.6% in the financial year 2023-24. And is expected by 2025-26, it is expected to increase to 71.5%. This is recurrent. Okay? It is, we are not that development is reducing, that goes to. So what does this mean? It implies that the fiscal space to invest in development budget is really shrinking, and we need to revisit that. At the same time, we observe that external financing is also projected, as per the framework, is projected to decline from about 2 trillion to about 1.6. Government funding is, I don't know, this has to be interpreted with a lot of caution. The share of government funding is stood at 74.8% in 2023-24 and is expected to go to 84% in 25-26. And this is partly